He feels everything, but shows almost nothing. That's the Sigma male's quiet paradox, the hidden tension he carries behind his steady face and controlled presence. People think he's detached, emotionless, unbothered, but they have no idea how deeply life actually cuts him. His sensitivity isn't loud. It doesn't explode. It sinks inward, folds itself into silence, and becomes a private storm no one ever sees. He reads too much into small details, absorbs energies others overlook, and notices the shift in someone's tone long before anyone else even registers it. But instead of expressing it, he swallows it. Instead of reacting, he analyzes. Instead of asking for reassurance, he reconstructs himself in silence. And eventually, that emotional overload becomes a trap, because the more he feels, the less he allows himself to show. The world mistakes his composure for distance, his quiet pain for indifference, and his self-protection for coldness. Yet beneath that armor is a depth most people could never handle, a sensitivity powerful enough to break him, or elevate him. And the danger is simple. The Sigma male carries storms without asking for shelter. He endures chaos without speaking a word. He holds himself together so well that no one realizes he's unraveling. If you've ever felt this contradiction inside yourself, feeling everything while showing nothing, then stay here. Silent Wise is the space where the unseen parts of you finally become clear. Before we continue, answer this in the comments. Do you hide your sensitivity? Or has hiding it become your default survival skill? And if this resonates with your inner world, subscribe to Silent Wise. Your clarity begins now. He feels emotions intensely, but hides them to avoid being misunderstood or exploited. He feels deeply, but he shows nothing. That's the paradox people never see. Inside him, emotions move like tides under moonlight, powerful enough to reshape his inner world, yet he buries every wave before it reaches the surface. He learned early that the more intensely he feels, the more casually others treat those feelings. So he built a quiet fortress around his heart, not out of coldness, but survival. When he walks into a room, he absorbs everything: tension, insecurity, unspoken resentment, as if his mind was tuned to frequencies others ignore. But instead of reacting, he lets silence become his shield, because expression has always carried a cost he refuses to pay again. He knows exactly what happens when you reveal your depth. People twist it, underestimate it, or weaponize it. So he adapts. He lets the world see only a calm, controlled exterior, while the real battle happens privately, with a discipline most people will never understand. He doesn't hide because he is weak. He hides because people have proven they cannot be trusted with the full truth of who he is. And yet, paradoxically, this silence makes the world think he feels nothing, when in reality he feels everything too much. The disappointment, the subtle disrespect, the shift in someone's tone, nothing escapes him. But instead of confronting it outwardly, he processes it inwardly, where he can maintain control. Deep inside, he wishes there were people safe enough to reveal the truth to. People who wouldn't turn his sensitivity into an opportunity to take advantage. But until he finds them, he chooses restraint. He carries his own storms quietly, because he knows his emotional intensity is both his greatest strength and his greatest vulnerability. What the world mistakes for emotional distance is actually self-preservation, crafted by someone who refuses to let others rewrite the meaning of his feelings ever again. He absorbs the energy of every environment, carrying emotional weight no one knows he's holding. He walks into a room and immediately feels everything: the tension people try to mask, the insecurity buried beneath a smile, the unspoken conflict vibrating between two people who won't admit it. While others see faces, he senses atmospheres. While others hear words, he hears intention. And without meaning to, he becomes the quiet container for emotions no one else wants to deal with. This sensitivity doesn't announce itself. It slips beneath his skin, layering itself until he's carrying a weight the entire room contributed to without ever realizing it. It's why he grows quieter in chaotic environments, why he prefers solitude, why he chooses peace over noise every single time. He can sense when someone is lying before the lie reaches their lips, not because of logic, but because the energy shifts. He can tell when someone is hurting, even when their expression hasn't cracked. He knows when someone resents him, envies him, or admires him, long before they decide to show it. The exhausting part is not the awareness, it's the responsibility he never asked for. He becomes the silent anchor in groups, the emotional buffer in conflict, the invisible stabilizer for people who have no idea he's holding their weight. They leave lighter. He leaves heavier, and because he rarely shows the toll, people assume he feels nothing. They mistake composure for emptiness, silence for detachment, calmness for distance. But inside, he is processing everything. The smallest shift in tone, the subtle withdrawal of someone's warmth, the shadow behind someone's confidence. This constant emotional decoding shapes him into someone hyper-aware, someone who reads reality in dimensions others overlook. But this ability comes with a cost. He often retreats not because he dislikes people, but because he feels too much of them. The world doesn't realize how many storms he carries home in his chest, how many atmospheres he has survived quietly, how many emotional burdens he has absorbed without recognition. He withdraws because silence is the only place where the emotional noise of the world fades enough for him to hear himself again. He reads people too deeply, turning his intuition into emotional overload. He doesn't just notice behavior, he dissects it. One glance, one pause, one shift in tone gives him more information than most people gather in an entire conversation. His intuition works like a radar scanning beneath the surface of every interaction, mapping insecurities, hidden tensions, unspoken desires, and buried fears. What others overlook, he absorbs instantly. What others miss, he cannot ignore. And while this depth of perception makes him incredibly aware, it also becomes the source of his silent exhaustion. He can tell when someone is pretending to be confident because their eyes betray a quiet plea for validation. He senses when someone is hurt, even when their words sound calm. He reads the emotional microcurrents that people try to hide, the hesitation, the envy, the admiration, the resentment. This makes him exceptionally skilled at navigating human behavior, but it also means he is constantly decoding emotional data most people never even register. His mind never stops connecting dots, and his heart never stops absorbing the emotional truth behind them. This hyper-awareness turns ordinary interactions into emotional puzzles he solves automatically without consent. Instead of simply listening, he feels. Instead of observing, he absorbs. And the deeper he understands someone, the more weight he carries. It's why he sometimes withdraws from social settings. Not because he is cold, but because he feels the emotional truth so intensely that it drains him long before anyone notices. People often misinterpret his silence as aloofness, when in reality it is self-preservation. His intuition doesn't come with an off switch, and the constant emotional input can become overwhelming. He sees too much, feels too deeply, understands too clearly. And that depth, while powerful, becomes a burden he must release in solitude. When he steps away, it's not rejection, it's recovery. It's the only way to steady his mind and clear his heart from the emotional noise he quietly decoded all day. He suppresses vulnerability because showing it once led to pain or disappointment. He learned the hard way that opening his heart does not guarantee understanding. The first time he exposed a genuine fear, a sincere hope, or a fragile piece of himself, the response he received carved a permanent mark into his memory. Maybe he was judged. Maybe he was mocked. Maybe someone used his honesty as leverage. Or maybe the person he trusted simply didn't handle his truth with the same care he offered theirs. Whatever the reason, the moment taught him something he never forgot. Vulnerability is powerful, but in the wrong hands, it is dangerous. So he built a quiet armor, not loud, not bitter, but firm. He doesn't share his struggles easily, not because he lacks emotion, but because he remembers the sting of being misunderstood at his most open. He carries depth like a sealed book, pages filled with stories no one has read, because he keeps them tucked behind silence and self-control. People see strength, confidence, independence, but they never see the cost behind it. They don't see the trust he once gave freely. They don't see the disappointment that reshaped him. Now, when emotions rise, he swallows them. When hurt appears, he processes it alone. When someone asks if he's okay, he nods, offering the safest answer instead of the truest one. Not out of coldness, but survival. Vulnerability, to him, is a currency he can't risk spending lightly. He reveals just enough to maintain connection, but never enough to be wounded again. This suppression doesn't mean he's heartless. It means he's learned. His silence isn't emotional absence. It's emotional protection. He knows that once trust is broken, rebuilding the courage to open up feels like walking barefoot over shards of the past. And until he meets someone who handles his honesty with gentleness, he will continue to guard his heart in the only way he knows: quietly, carefully, and alone. He overcontrols his reactions, creating a calm exterior that masks inner turmoil.
To the outside world, he looks unbreakable. His voice remains steady.
His expression barely shifts. His posture stays composed, even when the ground beneath him feels like it's falling apart. People admire this calm, assuming it's proof of strength, discipline, emotional mastery. They never realize it's also a shield, a reflex honed through years of learning that showing too much gives others too much power. So he keeps everything contained. The anger that simmers beneath his ribs, the disappointment twisting in his chest, the hurt he refuses to let anyone see. Instead of reacting, he breathes. Instead of exploding, he withdraws. And instead of revealing the chaos he feels, he offers the world a version of himself that looks untouched by pressure, untouched by conflict, untouched by pain. Inside, however, the story is different. His mind races through dozens of interpretations, possibilities, and emotional threads he will never express out loud. He processes every word someone says to him, every shift in tone, every subtle change in the atmosphere, not because he wants to, but because his intuition won't let him ignore it. That sensitivity creates internal storms he must hold back behind a single steady expression. He knows that if he lets even one reaction slip, a frown, a sharp retort, a moment of vulnerability, someone will read into it, judge it, misuse it, or expect more of him than he's ready to give. So he keeps the mask on. Not to deceive, but to protect. The calmness he shows the world is the dam holding back everything he refuses to let spill out. He pushes down the urge to snap, the desire to explain himself, the instinct to defend his emotions. Over time, this control becomes second nature, so seamless that even those closest to him can't tell when he's hurting. They see peace, but they don't see the cost of maintaining it. And this is his paradox. The more turmoil he feels inside, the quieter he becomes on the outside. Not because he lacks emotion, but because he has too much, and no safe place to put it except behind silence. He distances himself because emotional overwhelm feels safer than emotional exposure.
When the intensity inside him begins to rise, when feelings stack on top of each other faster than he can process, his first instinct isn't to open up, but to step back. Not because he doesn't care, and not because he wants to push people away, but because exposure feels like danger. To him, letting someone see the raw, unfiltered chaos of what he feels is more threatening than the chaos itself. Emotional overwhelm is familiar. He knows how to navigate it quietly, privately, without witnesses. But emotional exposure? That is unpredictable. That invites judgment, misinterpretation, or the possibility of being dismissed or minimized, something his sensitivity cannot risk again. So he pulls back. You'll notice it in the way he becomes quieter, in the slight delay before he replies, in the way his gaze shifts away as if searching for a place where he can breathe. Internally, he's flooded, but externally he becomes colder, calmer, harder to read. He tells himself he needs a moment, then an hour, then a day. He convinces himself he's just thinking, just reflecting, just reorganizing his mind. But the truth is simpler and far more painful. Distance feels like control. Distance feels like protection. Distance feels safer than letting someone see him struggle to hold himself together. In solitude, he can unravel without consequence. No one will misunderstand the look on his face. No one will misinterpret his silence. No one will ask questions he doesn't know how to answer. He can feel everything deeply, without the pressure to translate those feelings into words he's never been comfortable sharing. He can be overwhelmed without being exposed. And the tragic irony is this: the more he needs connection, the more he retreats from it. Not because he lacks courage, but because his past taught him that vulnerability is a risk few people know how to handle gently. So he chooses overwhelm over exposure, chaos he can contain rather than honesty that might shatter him. He transforms his unspoken pain into strength, but the world never sees the battle behind it. To everyone watching from the outside, his evolution looks effortless, a quiet shift, a subtle sharpening, a calm resilience that seems to appear from nowhere. People assume he was always this composed, always this controlled, always this disciplined. They see the strength, the steadiness, the unshakable presence he carries like armor.
What they never see is the battlefield he walked through to build it.
They don't witness the nights he spent wrestling with thoughts he couldn't voice, the heaviness he carried without a single complaint, or the moments he stood on the edge of breaking but refused to let himself fall apart where anyone could see. His pain never erupts outward, it calcifies inward. Every disappointment, every betrayal, every moment where someone misunderstood the depth of his sensitivity becomes a brick in the foundation he's constructing. He doesn't talk about what hurt him, he studies it, absorbs it, and quietly rebuilds himself around the wound until it becomes a source of clarity instead of confusion. He trains his heart the way others train their bodies, through resistance, pressure, and repetition. Each unspoken ache becomes a lesson. Each scar becomes a map. Each emotional blow becomes fuel. And he never asks for recognition, because the purpose was never to be admired. The purpose was survival, then transformation. People praise his strength, yet none of them would survive the storms he walked through alone. They admire his calm, yet they have no idea how many internal fires he had to extinguish before he learned how to stand still in chaos. They call him mysterious, detached, unreadable, never realizing that what they interpret as emotional distance is the after effect of battles fought in silence.
He emerges stronger, yes, sharper, yes, more self-controlled than ever. But that strength cost him pieces of himself he never talks about. And that is the paradox of his transformation. The world sees the strength he gained, never the softness he lost along the way. When a Sigma male moves through the world, people notice the strength, but never the story behind it. They see the calm, not the storms. The composure, not the rebuilding. The distance, not the wounds that shaped it. But if there's one truth that defines him, it's this: everything he becomes, he earns in silence. If this resonated with you, stay with us. Silent growth is powerful, but understanding it is even more powerful. Subscribe to Silent Wise for more deep psychological insights and tell me in the comments, which part of the Sigma journey do you relate to the most? The sensitivity, the silence, or the transformation?